All right, short reviews for June 21st. Yesterday, even. I did a little bit early this week because I'm switching up some of the scheduling for, whatever. This week I picked six again. This is probably going to switch over to about six every week now, unless just too many things come out and I can't keep up. But these are six very effective recordings that there are both basically picked whether or not I had anything to talk about. And this week, all pretty strong releases, all slightly flawed releases, except for one or two, which we'll get to pretty much right away. Uh, these are selected as curations, so keep that in mind and go look for things that maybe I missed and tell me about them. So we're going to start with Snorlax's The Necrotrophic Abyss. This is the second full length from this Brisbane, Australia-based initially a black metal project that was focused on kind of dissonant and just heavier spectrum of black metal, and now has incorporated death metal since the first full length. So what we get is something that is not necessarily typical of Australian black and death metal, but something which touches upon dissonance in moderate phrase and maintains a pretty heavy register throughout. It's a fairly consistent band in terms of just standard kind of death metal songs that, in terms of structure, that use a lot of black metal guitar techniques that are fairly modern. So this record is a little bit different than the first. The first was very focused and sort of merging into death metal, and this one sort of just generally is an extreme metal record. I know that sounds kind of stupid, but we have the first half of the record is Brendan Auld basically doing his thing, and it's pretty good. It's pretty solid stuff. There's a lot of guitar interest throughout the first half of the record, and I was getting into it. I saw it was going somewhere, and then the second half of the album is curated for about five different vocalists, two on the last track, and these are all bands, I believe all from the Brisbane area, who he's worked with or is just generally from the scene that they're creating there, which is pretty admirable. There's a lot of cool bands there. The thing with this is that it changes style to suit the vocalist. So we've got some sort of grindcore vocalists, some death metal, and some black metal, mostly death metal, and it kind of goes all over the place. It kind of gets lost in its own head, and I just found that it just felt like a tacked on second half, and it didn't feel related or like an experience. It feels kind of like the sort of maybe for more like the Spotify crowd who wants to pick up a song or two and kind of just vibe with an album. And for me, the full listen just wasn't solid front to back. So not a bad record. It's actually very well produced, very well recorded. The performances are pretty much flawless. All the vocalists are interesting. It's just that it didn't feel cohesive this time around. So uh, a little bit of a nitpick on my part, but it was, a moderately high recommendation. So check it out. I think it's an interesting band. So there you go. Infernal Curse is a bestial, what I would call a bestial death metal band out of Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Revelations Beyond Insanity is, I think, their third or fourth full length. They've been around since, I think, 2000, the 2000s at least, and their style for me has always reminded me of Proclamation, which is maybe a little bit more of a down-tuned, heavier, kind of reverberating feeling of the riff that comes with a unique style of riff, which and rhythm, which most would associate with like Abysmal Lord or even Antichrist Siege Machine, in terms of being a little bit cavernous uh, and a good mixture of death metal riffs in with the sort of blasted out war metal side of things. So there's a lot of minutia to war metal that's important to pick up on if you're a fan of it. And I think you'll find that atmosphere is kind of what will pull a lot of people into this record. I think that the riffs are what keeps you hanging out. And I'm always there for like the more death metal leaning, bestial war metal side of things. So this was a great release. I mean, it was pretty solid. I think the only thing is that it's just kind of a little bit one note after a while. The side B doesn't really add much more than just a little bit more interest in terms of riffs. And otherwise, I really had no complaint about this record that was serious at all. It was just, you know, Good to sit with a number of times, and it sort of runs its cycle. So definitely check this out if you're interested in anything from war metal to bestial black death metal. There's something interesting there that is familiar, but just maybe a little bit darker than more trite bands in the style. So check it out. So Rainer Landferman, it should be a familiar name if you are a fan of either Pavor, a German technical progressive death metal band from the early 90s through about the early 2000s, or if you're a fan of a certain Bethlehem record. This is quite famous. You'll know his voice right away. He put out a full length in 2019, and it sounds like this EP, about 9 minutes worth of music on a 12-inch record, is basically what sounds like either outtakes or an addition to that full length. So this would pair nicely if it was compiled with that record, and it is avant-garde extreme metal in the sense that it is progressive metal in spirit. It is has black and death metal influences, and it's really a showcase for his voice as much as his sense for avant-garde composition, which constantly takes sharp turns while creating various semi-melodic arcs. So there's a lot to this music. There's a lot to unpack, and really, does it justify 9 minutes for a 12-inch LP? There is such density here that I kind of get it, and the fact that they've made like an artful package of it helps out. Um, you'd have to probably be like an extreme fan of what he does, and I would understand if you were, because I've been a fan of his work in Pavor for a couple of decades now, ever since that second album came out. So um, definitely, uh, if you don't shy away from the weird, the avant-garde, and the over-the-top, this is an exceptional musician who's always ambitious, and I think that ambition really sold itself to me in this 9-minute EP, and I definitely recommend it. So we haven't heard anything from Gree or Sombre Foray since 2013. Maybe they've played some shows or done other things, but basically, Miserere Luminous is the first we hear from these guys for quite a long time. This is sort of a collaboration between the folks behind those two bands as well as another fellow, and Orderly is essentially post black metal looking back and looking forward at the same time. So they've really sophisticated what they do as a band in terms of creating the cinematic black metal that is not just atmospheric, but actually heavily informed by cinematic compositions. And there's piano, there's strings, there's saxophone. It's a very surreal, but not too sleepy form of post-black metal. And I know that the post-black metal tag will scare a lot of people away, but I think this is a dark and surreal enough experience that this will at least tip a few folks in that direction to check it out. I wasn't expecting to like it very much. I thought the album cover was very striking, and turned out it's very good. It's a very good listen. So definitely at least give the it's worth the build-up of the full album towards the last two tracks, but give one of the longer tracks at the beginning a chance, and see if that's your thing. Inevitable is, I think, the third full-length album from Portland, Oregon-based depressive black metal band None, and we should say depressive, atmospheric, and probably now a little bit of a kind of a post black metal touch to everything they're doing. They have leaned into their softer side, I guess, a more atmospheric album in general, and I just didn't connect with this one. The last one, it's a pretty high score for a record I didn't really enjoy. It just speaks to the quality of what they're doing and how it kind of stands out. But the last record really, I found it very effective, evocative, and interesting. And this is just a little bit hackneyed, a little bit typical, kind of slow and sleepy. And 16 minutes of this 57-minute record is basically ambiance in kind of the middle of the record, and at the end of the ambiance, the 9-minute section of those 16 minutes, a woman says, "I miss you," and then she dies. And it was just like, well, I, sorry to say, I laughed at that part. I thought it was just ridiculous. That's just me being a jerk, I guess. But it was just that the album was done for me at that point. It was just like the gurgling was done, and so was I. So, sorry to be a dick about that, but it just didn't connect with me, this record. And usually, I really love depressive music. It's definitely connect with that and on many different levels. And this just wasn't it this time around. So, A Hollow Full of Hope is the fourth full length from The River. This is a British former doom metal band who were always a little bit avant-garde, a little bit different on their first two records. They sort of developed sort of a touching kind of post-metal, post-doom metal feeling on their third record when they came back after a long break. And now this is the follow-up where they're basically just saying, well, we're kind of done with the metal thing, so this is just more of a folkish, pastoral, um, uh, definitely influenced by shoegaze music, by downbeat music. It doesn't go full on electronic pop, but there is a sentimental sort of rootsy feeling to this whole thing, which is very dramatic and really beautifully composed, very earnest feeling in its performances. I couldn't really fault it for what it does. It's just that it really isn't to my taste anymore, and I really enjoyed the ratio of the last record quite a bit. So this was just a little bit off for me. Might be your thing if you're into much softer, sort of alternative rock touched music. So check that out if that's to your taste.